Welcome to the Vegas Insider YouTube channel. It is the Daily Insider. Kevin Rogers with you. And today is Friday, January 7th, 2022. We're going to talk with Vince Akins coming up in just a few minutes, get his best trends for Week 18 of the NFL. That's right. We made it to the last week of the regular season, but still got some things to figure out with playoff seedings, as well as a couple spots available in the AFC and the NFC as far as the wild card goes. And right now, you have the AFC East up for grabs, as well as in the NFC. The NFC West is still up for grabs. So we'll talk about all that with Vince Akins coming up in just a moment. First, I want to say about BetMGM. They are the king of sports books, and new players only. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Again, new players only, must be 21 years or older to play, and is legal in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. All right, let's bring him on. Vince Akins, who joins us normally every Thursday, but now on Friday today to go over Week 18 of the NFL, the top trends. And Vince, good to see you again. And let's get right to it. The Colts and the Jags, which is it's one of those games that you would think Indianapolis would just show up, be fine. But there's some things you dug up, which I found interesting on going with Jacksonville.
Yeah, a couple of interesting nuggets here. Looking at the last week of the season specifically, so Week 18 now, but Week 17 for most years. A couple years in the past, 1993, 2001, there was a Week 18 as well. So looking at some different narratives around that, because obviously it's a different week for handicapping. As you'll see, there's a lot of lines that look a little different than they would the first 17 weeks of the season as well. So one of those narratives that I wanted to look at is kind of the idea of teams letting go of the rope. And, if that is a narrative, I think Jacksonville would fit that better than any other team. They've lost 8 straight games now. They lost by 40 points last week. So I was curious, you would think, okay, new coach coming in, team really struggling. Maybe they just kind of let go the last week of the season. But interestingly, teams in the final week of the season, they're on at least a 5-game losing streak heading into it. 35-23 against the spread in that final week of the regular season. I mentioned Jacksonville 8-game losing streak here. Actually, when it gets up to 8+ games coming into that final week, teams 10-5 against the spread. So despite a big losing streak, these teams actually do give a pretty good effort the last week of the season. And then on the other version of that, we mentioned Jacksonville losing by 40 points last week to the Patriots in a game where it didn't seem like they were trying particularly hard. So teams in the final week of the regular season that lost by 35 or more points last week, which you might think would be another spot where, okay, that team got blown out last week, maybe not all that interested in the final week of the regular season. Teams are, in fact, 10-2 against the spread historically. That looks at the last 30 seasons of data. 10-2 against the spread historically when they lost by 35+ points in the second last game of the regular season. So this just happened last year to Detroit. They were blown out in the second last game of the season, faced Minnesota the last week, and very competitive. It was a 37-35 loss for the Lions where they covered, in a game that was surprisingly competitive. So a final nugget on this game, and think about how things might be played. Obviously, we picked this game because Indianapolis has everything on the line. Huge 15.5-point favorite here. The Colts, this one goes back to November 2009, 1-10 over-unders, so 10 out of 11 unders as a double-digit favorite. And while that goes back a ways, they've been double-digit favorites 6 times now in just the last 2 seasons. 5 of those 6 games have hit the under. So think about a narrative about how the Colts might want to play this game. Conservative with everything on the line. It might lead to a lower scoring than expected game, as the Colts aren't taking a lot of chances. Huge favorites, particularly with such a meaningful game for Indianapolis.
Well, and also, too, Vince, one thing a lot of people don't realize, and understandably, they don't want to go back through the years. It's just they want to worry about this year. But Indianapolis has struggled in Jacksonville, that they've lost 4 in a row there. They lost that opener last year. That's when Jacksonville started 1-0 and then lost the final 15 games of the season. So the Colts, though, they've had their issues with Jacksonville. And going back to one of your trends about the blowout loss, that I got to believe after everything that's happened, the Urban Meyer stuff, and then losing the close game to the Jets a few weeks ago, getting blown out by New England, blown out by Houston, that you're getting this many points, you would think you'd get a good effort from Jacksonville, considering their season's over with. And the Colts, yeah, they're in the must-win spot, but you'd think Jacksonville would show up and at least give some kind of effort here.
Yeah, and with that 50.5-point line, I think there's plenty of room for both things. I think we'll talk about a couple other trends, but just when you look at the last week of the regular season in general, sometimes teams that are eliminated, just you look across some different systems and information, they tend to be undervalued in that last week. I mean, these are guys that are still, playing for their NFL lives, playing for their future, maybe playing for the next contract if they're a free agent, or hoping to sign on somewhere next year. So, oftentimes we think, okay, this team's got no motivation, but that's not necessarily the only motivating main factor is just going to play. I mean, the Jacksonville, or, there's several other teams you think about, okay, now there's very specific win, get in, win, have a seeding scenarios, but there's a lot of teams that, haven't been playing for anything for several weeks. And, you see different responses from different teams. A team like Jacksonville hasn't played particularly well the last few weeks. That doesn't mean they're not trying, but, like a team like Houston's had, a decent run down the stretch, even though they've arguably not been playing for something the whole season.
Now let's take a look at the AFC North, Vince. Ravens and the Steelers, and obviously disappointing end for Baltimore. They're 8-3. They've dropped 5 in a row. And yes, Lamar Jackson's been out for a while, so that doesn't help when your MVP is not playing and the Ravens have a ton of injuries. But Pittsburgh, though, they beat Cleveland on Monday night, and they still got an outside shot. They need a win. They need the Colts to lose. They need the Chargers and Raiders not to finish in a tie. They need a lot to happen. Baltimore needs a lot to happen as well. But the Ravens here laying some points. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be for Baltimore in this game. And the Ravens did lose to the Steelers last time at Heinz Field. What do you have here with Pittsburgh and Baltimore?
Yeah, this was sort of the waiting in the wings game happening at the same time as Jacksonville, Indy, and they would really need Jacksonville to step up and have that big game, either of these teams. So I would expect this is one of the few games on the slate where you should be getting some pretty good effort from both teams. So a couple of interesting nuggets. Obviously, Pittsburgh and Baltimore, longtime rivals in the AFC North, played twice a season. So the Ravens have covered the last 6 meetings, the second meeting of the season happening in week 10 and beyond. So second half of the season, second meeting of the season. You think about adjustments these teams can make against each other. The Ravens have been the benefactors of that, having covered that second meeting the last 6 times, going back to 2014, was in the second half of the season. So obviously these teams just met in week 13. Pittsburgh held on for a 20-19 win. This was the start of Baltimore's run of some extremely close losses. Pittsburgh was also the underdog in that game, as they are here. So going back to 2013, the Steelers have gone under in all 6 games, facing a team they upset in the first meeting of the season. So there were a few of those against the Bengals, Browns, and the Ravens in there as well. They upset the team the first week of the season, play things close to the vest the second time. So finally, obviously, that Monday night game against the Browns was a unique game for the Steelers. And I looked this up, a fun extra nugget here. This is actually the first time in league history a team won a game in which they threw for at least 40 passes, but threw for less than 3 yards per attempt. So Pittsburgh threw 46 times in that game with just 109 passing yards. This is the first time in league history a team, I mentioned that factors, win 40-plus passes with such inefficient passing, still went on to win a game. So looking at Steelers coming off a game where they didn't throw for a whole lot of yardage, meant 109 yards in that game. Going back to October 2015, the Steelers 0-10-1 over-under, so 10 unders and 1 push as a dog when they threw for less than 210 yards last game, but ran for at least 50 yards. So it wasn't a complete wasted offensive effort. Obviously, Monday night, the Steelers ran for 190 yards. The running game was not the issue against the Browns. So it's kind of a poor passing game that also wasn't an extremely poor rushing game. The next game, they tend to go lean on that run, lean on some conservative passing as well, leading some unders.
Najee Harris was great in that game, and it felt like Ben was throwing all these short passes. Like you mentioned, like earlier, it was like 13 completions for like 80 yards. It was something ridiculous. But the Steelers got that win. Even though we have the trends for this other game, what are your thoughts with the Browns and the Bengals, considering you have no Baker, you have no Burrow, Mixon's out? That Cleveland, you think that they pull it together for one last game now with Case Keenum, or it's just a stay away game?
This one's hard to handicap a little. There are a lot of numbers that are favor Cleveland and their motivation in this situation. And this is going to be one where I think it's important to watch the Friday injury report here, and maybe even into the weekend a little bit, and see exactly who's playing in this game. Obviously, we know no Burrow, no Mixon. Does that mean all no skill position players for the Bengals? That's not entirely clear yet. And then exactly what the Browns are going to do. They have several players in that injury report, and is Nick Chubb playing in this game? Is Denzel Ward playing in this game? So it's a little unclear. I think that's going to tip off, particularly on the Browns side, what their motivation might be in this game. If you see these reports, and if they're really shutting down everyone, if Ward, Myles Garrett's been banged up at times, Chubb, if all those guys are actually going to give it a go or not. I think right now there's some ambiguity. That's not entirely clear, but that should make itself clear sometime before Sunday morning, and that might give a little more clarity on where this line should be. And I can see another move in here as well as if the Browns are giving it a full go. You think about no Mixon, no Burrow, probably very limited skill position players from the Bengals. This could actually be a value even with the Browns laying points if they are really going to give it an effort here with Case Keenum in Week 18.
Now let's take a look at one of the late games, the 49ers and the Rams in LA. And San Francisco has won 5 straight meetings with Los Angeles. Somehow Kyle Shanahan's had Sean McVay's number. And it's like Sean McVay has Cliff Kingsbury's number in Arizona, but yet McVay has struggled against Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. They beat him earlier this year on a Monday night as a home dog. San Francisco needs to win to get in. They can lose, and if the Saints lose, the Niners still get in. But you don't know Jimmy Garoppolo's status. Trey Lance played last week. The offense picked it up in the second half against Houston. Rams are rolling right now. What do you have with this matchup with the Rams and the Niners?
Sure, a few things. First off, obviously a big thing to notice here is this huge line swing game over game for the 49ers. Last week, they were 13-point favorites facing Houston. This week, a 4.5-point underdog. So looking historically here, teams that are at least 4-point underdogs that were at least 13-point favorites in their last game, 20-13 against the spread, so pretty solid against the spread performance there. And very interesting, 11-23 over under. So more than 2/3 of those games have gone under the total historically. And you think about, they were in a very comfortable position last week, not so much this week, and how teams might want to play. They've obviously done well in those games against the spread, but a little more conservative, keeping things tight, and would sort of expect this to be a tight game on Sunday. So looking at a couple other factors with the over/under, a couple interesting things with the Rams. Since 2018, the Rams have gone under in all 11 games when they're favored, and the total is no more than 46. So we have the total of 44.5 there. The Rams playing as a favorite. You don't necessarily think of Sean McVay, conservative play calling, conservative coach, but I think sometimes that skews where bettor's perception ends up relative to their totals. This is a lower total game, which they've played several of as a favorite. The Rams actually tend to play a bit conservatively as well, and that goes into another thing interesting. The past 2 seasons. Last season, this season, when the Rams are at home past week 4 of the season, so we're past the first month of the season at home, the Rams have gone under in all 10 games. So again, that goes a little bit against, I think, what common perception is with Sean McVay and the way his teams play. We're at home. We've settled into the season a little bit. It's not exactly the high-flying, high-scoring games that maybe some expect. It's 4 unders already this season. That was 6 straight unders at home to end the 2020 season as well.
No, it's a really good pickup there. And I'm thinking back to who the Rams played at least recently. Seattle, Jacksonville. They had that Tennessee that was a second half, so I guess it would start maybe there. But even the last 2, they gave up 10 to Seattle, gave up 7 to Jacksonville. So the defense has stepped up. It really has. And the Rams are very good defensively. They have Aaron Donald. They have Von Miller. I mean, there are plenty of names there. And look, the Rams right now, I think, Vince, are not only they're hitting their stride, I feel like that 3-game losing streak they had was like perfect timing. End of November, now you move on to December, and they've won 4 straight. The Baltimore game was in January, technically. But this team now, this is the Rams team that we all thought would be one of the threats in the NFC.
Yeah, and this is one of those, I think a big factor in this week's games is how motivated our team's going to be for seeding. This is one of those with Arizona having a pretty good shot forcing their hand on the division, where I do think having that home game and being in the top 3 or 4 in the seeding is going to make a difference. So there's going to be a lot of interesting games this week. How much does a team like Dallas, how much does a team like Tampa Bay, Buffalo and New England still have some divisional considerations, but a few of those teams in the AFC as well. Kansas City, do they think they have a realistic shot at the 1 seed, and how motivated those teams are with just the 1 bye. The difference between 2 and 4, where that falls opponent wise week 1, that's got to be happening at the same time. But with no second bye, we really haven't had a week like this. Last season wasn't quite as competitive in those 2 through 4 spots, where it's clear. It seems like the Bengals are the first team that said, they're pretty locked in towards the 4 seed. If they happen to get something better, great. But how these other teams on the NFC side are going to factor that in. But the Rams are the 1 team of those with a division title on the line as well, that you do think are probably going to give that full effort in this game.
Now, the final game we'll look at, AFC West battle, in which you win and you're in, or that they said if these 2 teams tie, they get in, the Chargers and the Raiders. They just run the ball the entire time. But the Chargers laying 3 here, Vince, against Las Vegas. And the Raiders, who have had a wacky season for a lot of reasons, because John Gruden gets fired. They won their next 2 after he got fired, and they went in a free fall and then came back. They've won 3 straight, all close scores. And now they face a Chargers team. The Chargers always the joke of the Chargers will Charger. It's going to be, you think that you figure them out and then you don't figure them out. But they have a guy in Justin Herbert who's been fantastic this year. Chargers laying 3. They beat the Raiders earlier this year at home. What do you have with this one, the final game of the regular season?
Sure. Obviously, this is going to be an interesting one, and you can put all your Chargers Raiders tie parlays in with the Jaguars and whoever else you want to add there for some fun Week 18 betting, I suppose. But as far as this game, I've highlighted a few things on the total, and it starts with this game 49.5. That's the highest total of this week. The last week of the regular season totals tend to dip a little bit for whether it becomes a factor in some places. Also, just when teams lack motivation, start playing backup quarterbacks and backups, totals tend to fall. The final week of the regular season, you're seeing that with a lot of these games this week. This being the only game with a total above 48 currently. So looking just the last 2 seasons, games in the final week of the regular season with a total of at least 47. Those are 10-1 over under. So 10-11 have hit the over. So it's justified. The totals that have remained high the last couple of weeks, the last couple of years in the final week of the regular season, it's generally been with the reasons, because they've been some high scoring games. So we could be looking at a fun shootout in this one. Also, a couple other factors there with the over-under. The Raiders, just 3-point home dogs in this game. Going back to December 2019, all 9 of their games have gone over when they've played as a home dog of at least 2 points. So a home underdog for the Raiders. They have played aggressively. We've seen that several times this year, starting with the Week 1 primetime game against the Ravens Monday night, or a couple other primetime games as well, hosting the Chiefs. Have led some high-scoring games. The final nugget here on this one, the Raiders. This one goes to November 2019. They're 11-1 on the over/under at home, facing a team that's allowed at least 22 points per game. So the Chargers' defense can certainly be shaky at times, allowing well above that. 11-1 over/under when they've facing a team allowing at least 22 points per game, compared to that same time frame when they've faced a team that's averaging less than 22 points per game allowed, just 2-6 over/under. So it's really been a dichotomy of how they play at home against a good defense versus a poor defense. The Chargers fall on that poor side of the spectrum.
Last year, when the teams played, Vince, you had 2 overs, including the overtime win by the Chargers over the Raiders. That was the Herbert sneak in overtime. That was a 30-27 game. This year, in the Monday Nighter, 52 stayed under, was comfortably under 28-14. So you go from a 52 back in week 4 to now a 49.5. And like you mentioned, with that final week, the highest total, that one normally goes over. So be interesting to see if they revert back to that. Las Vegas only had 213 yards of offense in that game. Derek Carr struggled. They were all over him in that game. But be curious to see here if it reverses after you had the low-scoring game relatively for those teams the first time.
Yeah, and that was, I believe the Raiders were held scoreless well into the second half of that game. It was just a game where their offense never got going. I think the Chargers defense was playing a little better in that game than they maybe currently. And, they've been a bit of a hit or miss defense all season. That was one of their better efforts. So we'll see if they can match that here.
Yeah, and Herbert had a good game. Yeah, the Raiders were down 21-0 at the half. Made it interesting in the second half, but the Chargers ended up pulling away. Final game we'll look at here. National Championship Monday night in Indianapolis, Georgia and Alabama. And, again, everyone will look at Nick Saban, great as an underdog. He hasn't lost to Kirby Smart yet. They beat Georgia in the SEC Championship a few weeks ago. But now Georgia favored again after they beat up Michigan. Bama knocked off Cincinnati. What do you have for the National Championship Monday night?
Sure. There's obviously going to be a lot of angles for this game, and I should have some pretty good selections for it coming up on the website posted this weekend. But I do want to, one sort of interesting nugget that I want to highlight here is this is a same season rematch, and we don't get those very often in college football. Often they come in conference championship games and some select bowl games as well. Obviously, these teams met in the SEC championship just a few weeks back now. So how do those second games go? So just some basic nuggets here as we start talking about this game heading into Monday. First of all, same season rematches, two FBS teams, 21-33 over under. This goes back to 2006. So over 60% hit rate on the under in the second game. You think about teams familiar with each other, have met already this season, have the scouting, have the tape. It's led to lower scoring games than anticipated in that second matchup. As far as against the spread, the team that won the first matchup is just 24-30 against the spread. So 44% cover that second one after winning the first matchup in a same season rematch. And again, you end up getting about 3 or 4 of these a year typically in college football. Obviously, this is the biggest one in some time in the national championship here Monday.
Yeah, and a lot of people looking forward to this game just simply to see if Georgia can rebound and get over the hump against Alabama. And obviously, if Kirby Smart can get over the hump against Nick Saban and Bama, the defending champions, a little beat up right now. But, hey, it's going to be a great game. You got the two best teams left. And, again, we'll see if Georgia can get some revenge, if they could do it, or if Alabama just completely continues to own them and picks up another national championship. Vince Akins, you could find him on Twitter, SB Breakers. That's right, SB Breakers. And great job by Vince all season. We're going to talk to Vince next week for the playoffs because we have 6 games to look at, and we'll see what the best trends that Vince digs up for those games. And you can find his picks on Vegas Insider as well. He's been great in the NFL this season. Vince, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again next week.
Absolutely. Best of luck, everyone. Enjoy a great weekend of football.
Yeah, and it's the final weekend of the entire NFL playing. And then we'll knock this thing down to 14 teams, and then we will be down the next week. We'll get rid of 6 more after this upcoming weekend. And we also have that Monday night game, remember. Obviously not this Monday, the following Monday, the final wild card game. So we have a lot to get to, and a lot of teams that they're going to be bounced very quickly in this. All right. DraftKings, the championship series, the GOAT. We love that GOAT. He wears that crown proudly. Score your seat to the Tournament of Champions now. Go to DraftKings.com. The DraftKings Championship Series is the ultimate competition of contest winners from daily fantasy sports, sportsbook, and casino. The one and only place you can compete in the king of competitions. The best of the best in each domain will compete for series supremacy in their own domain's Tournament of Champions. They'll have one goal in mind. You know what that is. Be the GOAT. Wear that crown proudly like our friend here on the screen. And you could be that greatest of all time. Just check out DraftKings.com for more details, and you will be all set. All right, want to talk some NBA now. And in case you missed it last night, a couple things. One, the Celtics led the Knicks by 25, lost at the buzzer on an RJ Barrett three-pointer. Just inexcusable loss by the Celtics. They found a way to do this a lot this year, blowing these games. They lost 108-105. Game miraculously stayed over the total. Slow first quarter, good second quarter, not great third quarter. Not great fourth quarter. I mean, 50s now don't mean anything in the NBA. These totals, even the low totals are at 208, 210. You still need a 52 or a 53 every quarter. A 50 does nothing for you. But the Knicks, they beat the Celtics 108-105. I mean, for Boston to blow a 25-point lead is inexcusable, to say the least. Now, I'll have to issue a public apology. I had Detroit as my guarantee on the site last night, and I liked the spot the Pistons were in. They were getting 13. Memphis has been playing well. There's no disputing that. 16-4 their previous 20. I just thought the scheduling spot, Memphis, after beating Brooklyn and Cleveland on the road, they're going to LA this weekend to face the Clippers and Lakers. You're facing Detroit, who just was blown out by Charlotte back on Wednesday. That maybe the Pistons hang, and they didn't. And Memphis pretty much ran them from wire to wire. So that was a bad pick. Just simple as that. And we'll bounce back tonight. Pelicans beat the Warriors 101-96. And Steph Curry didn't play. Draymond Green didn't play. And Golden State, needless to say, just not the same team without those guys, especially without Steph. Suns pulled away from the Clippers 106-89. That was a Western Conference rematch. Suns were up comfortably in that game. Clippers came back, made it close. They were down 5-7 points, getting 10.5, but Phoenix pulled away in the end, and that game stayed under the total. All right, let's run through some of these games here in the NBA tonight. College is not very busy. You have a few Horizon League games, a few Big East games. Let's go through the NBA quickly. Spurs and 76ers in Philadelphia. Spurs laying 7.5, or the Sixers, laying 7.5 to the Spurs. San Antonio off that win over Boston. Sixers beat the Magic a few nights ago. Bucks and the Nets, that's the highlight game in the Eastern Conference. Kyrie Irving won't play because he's not vaccinated, and they're playing in New York. So Kyrie played his first game against Indiana back on Wednesday, played well, but now he's got to sit out. Nets laying 4.5 against the Bucks. Giannis supposed to play tonight. He missed Milwaukee's last game against Toronto, and Giannis should play. Rematch of the very good Eastern Conference semifinal series that was won by the Bucks in 7 games. The Raptors laying 11.5 to the Jazz. Why? Because everyone on Utah is out. No Donovan Mitchell, no Rudy Gobert, no Mike Conley, no Joe Ingles, all of them not playing. So you're going to get a very busted up roster for Utah tonight. That's why the Raptors are laying 11.5. And Toronto's been on fire, but still Utah would allow their guys out. We see how much it affects all these teams. Dallas is at Houston. Mavericks laying 2. Luka Doncic doubtful for the Mavericks. They've been on a nice under run, 5 in a row to the under. Rockets, we know they're not good, but they could score a little bit. And you wonder if Houston can bust through that under streak by Dallas. Minnesota's at Oklahoma City. Timberwolves laying 6 to the Thunder. They just beat Oklahoma City a few nights ago. They were up by 20 after 1, but Minnesota failed to cover in that game as Oklahoma City went on a late run, but the Timberwolves still ended up getting the victory. Wizards and the Bulls in Chicago. Remember, Bulls beat the Wizards last week on the DeMar DeRozan three-pointer at the buzzer. Now Washington at 19-19 just lost to Houston. Now they face Chicago. 25-10 for the Bulls. Pretty impressive job. Kings and the Nuggets in Denver. Nuggets laying 8. They're 18-18. Sacramento 16-24. And first time these teams meeting up this season. Nuggets just lost to the Jazz a few nights ago. And the Kings just lost to the shorthanded Hawks at home back 2 nights ago. The Hawks and Lakers tonight in L.A. And Trae Young, who missed that Sacramento game, he is questionable right now. And the Hawks have a lot of guys in COVID and other stuff. LeBron, probable. Lakers laying 3 to the Hawks. L.A. back above 500. Congratulations. Cleveland's at Portland. And the Cavaliers laying 6. Who never thought that'd be the case? But Damian Lillard's out for the Blazers. So that's a reason why. But Cleveland laying 6 there. 21-17 for the Cavs. And the Blazers at 14-23. They had a promising start to the season, but they've fallen off. College basketball tonight, Marquette and Georgetown at 6:30 in the Big East. Marquette laying 2.5 after they just blew out Providence. Georgetown's been off for a while due to COVID. Xavier Butler at 8:30 from Indianapolis. Butler's been off for a while. Xavier laying 6.5 there against the Bulldogs. You have a couple Ivy League games tonight. What do you have? The one MAC game, Kent State and Ohio. Ohio laying 7.5. Several Horizon games, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Detroit. That's an ESPN2 game. Cleveland State and Robert Morris. That's a mismatch there. And also Fort Wayne and Youngstown State in the Horizon. and a couple games inside the Southland. We've already gotten underway, and some games later on, and then a whole bunch of games coming up tomorrow in college basketball. So that's the look there. And of course, NFL tomorrow. You have Chiefs, Broncos, Cowboys, Eagles. Those are the two games going on in the NFL. And Dallas is interesting because they have some guys in COVID protocol. Michael Gallup tore his ACL. You wonder how long Dak is going to play. Eagles are in. They can improve their seeding, but motivation is a little weird in that game because both those teams are in. BetMGM, they're the king of sports books. New players only. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. And again, must be 21 years or older to play. And it is legal in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. Before we get out of here, just to remind you all, sports betting set to go live in the great state of New York coming up tomorrow morning. So congratulations to New York for getting into the sports betting world, and definitely going to be a lot of discussion there about that. So that's pretty cool that New York now, tomorrow, 9 a.m., they will get going with legalized sports betting. My thanks to Vince Akins for joining me on the show today. You can check out the Bet and Collect podcast later for Week 18 of the NFL, breaking down all the games, the meaningful ones and the meaningless ones, all of them, because you can bet on any of them. So that's a good thing. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great weekend. And as always, best of luck with your bets.